This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
The Chase Down Podcast is brought to you by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract. There's no commitment. Try free at FuboTV.com. Hello, everyone. This is not Justin Rowan. This is Carter Rodriguez back after I ran away from the grind, after the Cavaliers were eliminated by the New York Knicks in 5 games, after I boisterously predicted Cavs in 5. I got the amount of games right, just not the eventual winner. Justin and Mac Robinson were so kind as to cover for me while I was on a work trip, and thank God for a good work trip to get away from your troubles. But you can only run so long, and joining me in the despair is my dear friend Jeff Nomina covering for Justin. How you doing, buddy?
I was also a Cavs in 5, but I feel like we just need rotten fruit thrown at us for the next hour or so here.
I think we aren't normally so I definitely am the pessimist of my particular pod duo. I feel like you angst with the best of them. I think this is on us in a lot of ways. You know, we believed, and that's on us in the end.
It just, when you went through the talent, when you went through the rosters, it just didn't feel like this should be this close, or not this close. I mean, obviously not this close, but it didn't feel like it should be close in general. It felt like I was getting a little over my skis. I was getting a little cocky about it, but it didn't seem outlandish. It didn't seem like this was likely or possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we should probably just start with, it's been, just over a week, actually just under a week since the Cavs were eliminated. And how are you feeling a week removed? Do you feel just as upset? Are you going full Dixie Chicks, not ready to make nice? How are you feeling a week out? Because I think I've finally landed on a healthy place. Prepping for the pod, I'll tell you what, if you guys have an unhealthy relationship with your sports team, do a podcast about them, because when you have to think critically about it, it actually helps quite a bit. But I feel like I settled into some semblance of security today. But how are you feeling? You still hurting?
It's funny, you told me that the last time I was on, we talked about this before the pod, was right after the trade deadline, and you were like, we were both kind of grumpy, and you're like, well, once you sit through the pod, once you have to think about things, once you have to talk it through, you'll feel a lot better. And I did. So I'm hoping that happens now, because I am not better. I was joking earlier that I'm having an existential crisis. Can I still be a sports fan? Does this bring me any joy? David Zabek and I have a running joke that we're going to pick up a new hobby. We're just going to start doing puzzles. I'm just going to be a puzzles guy, because sports bring me so little joy, so much of the time. So I'm still grumpy to the point where I don't think I've watched more than 2 minutes of another game. I can't decide if the fact that it just all went bad, every single thing was bad, is helping me or hurting me right now. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And to the sports pain point, I've always said, there is no other hobby that any part of society partakes in where there is a 50% chance or greater that you leave that hobby miserable.
Yes.
Could you imagine if, one of your wife's favorite things to do left her this upset? You would be
furious.
You would be, first off, thank God for all the significant others of sports fans across the world for putting up with this. Because I was pouting after game 4, because obviously I wasn't home for game 5. And I just knew I was such a loser to be pouting at my house with my children and my wife, and you can't help it. You can't help it. I do think here's where I think I have landed, and maybe this is as the kids say, some premium copium, but I have a theory, and I want to bounce it off you, Nam. I wonder if the parity in the NBA and the talent level in the NBA is such that the styles make fights type of thing that we would historically just say, yeah, I mean, it's a weird matchup, but they're not as good. Or, yeah, they've got better depth, but, you know, they're not as good at the top. Maybe everyone's so good now that's less of a factor, that you have to play well and you have to out execute. You out talent like the way that the Cavs got to do in 2018 as an example. Obviously they had to fight their way to the finals, but they did it. And like, I don't know if you can do that in today's league with today's talent level.
And we were sort of an extreme version of that because there wasn't a lot of different looks we could send out. There weren't a lot of cards to play if the first thing didn't work. And given the chance to scout for that, to plan for that, I mean, we kind of got punched in the face. Like, we just didn't have much of an answer at all, and didn't really even make a ton of attempts at things that could. There just weren't a lot that JB could do, and I wouldn't say he did pull a ton of levers to change things significantly either. So like, yes, you're right. Like, the style played into it more, and we were also at a disadvantage there because just based on the roster and things, we couldn't play many different styles to try to combat anything that they were doing. Yeah,
I look at Memphis Lakers. I still think Memphis is probably the more talented team of those two teams, just top to bottom. Obviously, AD was insane, but LeBron's on 1 foot. Like, he really is on 1 foot if you're watching closely. But, LA was able to get Memphis into half-court sets. They were able to protect the boards. And, like, they said, hey, in the closeout game, Ja Morant's going to take 4 corner threes in a row because we are so perfectly equipped to take away what you want to do. Same with the Miami Heat. They've always been able to give Milwaukee trouble. And they said, hey, we're not better than you, but we're just going to fire up a ton of threes and hope it gets hot. And like, sometimes those, I just feel like there is a little bit more consideration to style and seeing kind of these upsets because, if there's one thing to feel better about as a Cavs fan, and like, I guess to some extent you could argue it should make you feel worse, is that everyone's losing. The Celtics are down 0-1, playing without Embiid for the Sixers. The Bucks are out of the playoffs. The Grizzlies are out of playoffs. The Kings are out of the playoffs. The Suns are down 0-2, despite having what appears to be a top-end talent advantage. So like, maybe style, versatility, and fit, and that rock paper scissors kind of my strength beats your strength, but your strength beats someone else's strength. Maybe that's just what the Cavs ran into in the series, and that's not to say I don't think there's a lot they should learn or take away, but like, it's happening so everywhere else, that like, I can't help but wonder if like there might be something of a trend here.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it. So if that's your copium, I'm going to take a little hit of it because it does make a lot of sense that when it's happening to this many different teams, it makes it easier to look at yours and say like, well, we're not the only ones. Like, clearly there's some sort of weird market factor or happening here that is causing more than just us to experience this. But ours was so extreme that it still hurts really bad.
Oh, yes.
Like it happened quickly, and it never felt like we really were in it. It was shocking in that regard to me. It didn't even feel like much of a fight.
So I think that is probably a little bit of I think that's probably not fair. The more I think about it, in the sense of, we never weren't playing their style. Like, they weren't they dictated the terms the entire series. That is certainly true. But they were in these games. Really, like,
they were in them, but they were down 8 almost all the time. Like, it wasn't like we were giving up late leads. It's not like we were close at the end and it was some free throws. Like, it was us chasing them.
It was certainly a thorough defeat. I'm not here to back off of that, but I do think they were in these games, and like, to that end, I do think their top end talent kept them in it, even though none of their top end talent performed particularly well. And like, I think probably where we should really start like analyzing, kind of trying to post-mort this series is, like you did mention, everything went wrong. They couldn't get defensive rebounds. Their depth was clearly not there. Like, JB clearly had 4 guys he trusted, and only 3 of those might be good on a given night. Maybe 5 if you count Karras. The rotations were weird and messy. It felt, like Justin and I talked about, going to Ricky in game 3, like preemptively guessing that they would be rattled, it seemed. The bigs got bullied. The guards had horrific series at different points. I think Darius was slightly better, but he also had the worst game by a mile in game 3. They couldn't shoot. The spacing was a mess. And I think the challenge of having so many things go wrong is it's kind of hard to identify cause of death. I think I titled this episode a playoff Post-Mort for a reason, because that's really what we got to do. We got to figure out what was the root cause in a pretty rough series. And where does your brain go if you're Kobe Altman, if you're JB Bickerstaff, if you're this collective organization, what do you do? What do you pinpoint? Because I talk a lot about how the front office and the coaching staff has to choose which lessons to learn from. This is kind of my theme of every offseason is you can't react to every lesson because sometimes things are interdependent or you just need to be patient. So what lessons do you kind of leave this going? What is your first step towards diagnosing this cause of ejection in the postseason en route to trying to fix it next year?
I think they need some versatility. I just don't think they could throw out enough different looks. I think when things weren't working, the fact that Jarrett Allen was still just trying to battle Mitchell Robinson for rebounds in game 5 and losing consistently. And I'm not blaming him. I'm not one of those thinking he got bullied. He's asked to do a million things on that end, and it just was not really fair. But the fact that we just couldn't really go to many different looks, I think was really hard. So I think they need some versatility, some guys that could play some different positions. We talked about this after the deadline. They have an entire roster of sort of one skill, not even one way, but kind of one skill kind of guys. And it makes it really hard to cobble together lineups. It'd be nice to have some guys that can just fit different places, play up or down in position, and really do different things. So we can throw different looks at teams, because when one look's not working, it's really, really hard if you don't have the personnel to start giving different looks. And part of that is shooting. They need a lot of shooting, but some of that hopefully will come internally. Darius Garland better be shooting 8 threes a game next year. That has to start happening. Evan Mobley's got to start learning to shoot a little bit, and they need to add shooting. But I think they need shooting that can move around to different spots too, not just a very specific shooter, stretch four, not just that. They need guys that can move around a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, to that end, obviously, the Kevin Love thing is going to keep coming up till it doesn't. And you know what? I think, I hope I'm not misattributing this, but I think it was Ben Cox that tweeted harping on Kevin Love kind of feels like playing the result, but the result matters, and the result was a team that missed defensive rebounding and shooting. So yeah, it's going to come up. It just is, the fact that he was on the team and then he wasn't, the team not only didn't add at the deadline, a piece of talent left. That talent did not look like it was going to be super helpful at that point, but still, it certainly was a factor. But to your point, I do think there is something about, multi-positional shooting. You don't just I don't think this team can just add a pick and pop big this summer and go, done, spacing solved.
Right.
You need different, to your point of of that versatility. It does feel like you need versatile shooting, you need movement shooting, you need pick and pop shooting, you can just have guys who can space to the corner and just do minor relocation shooting, but you have to do it all. I don't think you can just add one archetype. Max Strus's name is going to come up a lot this summer, at least for me, as a kind of ideal target as a movement shooter. But if you just add one shooter, it kind of reminds me of the kind of thing the Grit and Grind Grizzlies tried to chase. They would always chase that one shooter, and it's well, you're still playing 3 guys who can't shoot or won't shoot.
Right.
And like, so you have to, this might have to be a kind of a systemic thing where you go, hey, everyone we're looking at getting minutes that is not the core 4 had better pull, if they play 36 minutes, they better take 6 or 7 threes. That might have to be the kind of philosophy Kobe goes with. And like, I think to me, when you're looking to identify like what lessons to learn, I think the shooting or the versatility, I think it's actually all kind of a similar way of saying, let's just knock out the easy stuff first. I don't know how much I want to focus on Donovan Mitchell having a horrible series right now.
Yes.
It's just because it's like evaluating the messiest possible data. Because I watched that series, and sure, Donnie didn't play super well, but also every time he had the ball, he had Josh Hart beating him up at the point of attack and 3 Knicks on the way. So
it's such a fascinating thing to figure out because every single guy pretty much underperformed, and every single one of them had a pretty decent excuse for why.
Yep.
But it's like somebody, if everyone's getting that much attention, somebody should have been able to do something, right? Like Mobley should have been able to handle Randall, like score a little bit on Randall one-on-one, or Garland should have been able to take all that attention that's going to Mitchell and make more happen with him. And Mitchell should have been able to do more because he's the superstar and the playoff guy. And it's interesting to look at it. And like, I can make a pretty strong case why everyone underperformed, but at some point, like somebody had to be open, right? Like somebody had to have opportunities.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it is hard. I think that's why I kind of keep going back to, let's try to build a structure that we know kind of works in the postseason. We know that you need to be able to shoot the basketball. We know you need to put out different kinds of lineups. So like when you're looking at the kind of choices Kobe needs to make this summer, whether it comes from internal growth or from free agency or from trades or whatever it might be, probably not the draft, no first round pick this year. Though plenty of good second rounders out there. I'm gonna be fully obsessed with 3 players by the time we get there. But with all that said, like it does feel like you need to like what player archetypes are you looking to add to kind of address those issues?
I would love to find, and I'm going to give out like 3 names of guys that are very unlikely to be able to be acquired by the Cavs, but like the Harrison Barnes, Grant Williams, Cam Johnson, 3-4 tweener kind of guy. And I know a lot of those guys are more 4s and 3s, but I think on this team, Laurie kind of showed us that you could be a 3-4 and play the 3 pretty well and have success. Like that kind of guy, I think would be really helpful because it gives you some interesting lineups. It lets you downsize, put more shooting, space teams out, stretch them out more. And that probably makes life a lot easier on Allen and Mobley. I think, that was maybe one of the lessons is how hard life was on those 2 guys in a playoff setting, and being able to give some different lineups, play some guys off the court and give those guys more space would be really helpful. So I would love to find some of those kind of tweener, jack of all trade guys that could do a lot. They're maybe not putting the ball on the floor a ton, but they're able to do a lot of things, not take a lot off. Dean Wade was kind of supposed to be that guy. He's had kind of a lost season, but some guys that can shoot, that can defend, that can rebound a little bit, play multiple spots. That 3-4 spot, I think, would be huge.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's kind of one of the first places I look because it's just the most obvious, especially if Evan's going to be the team's like primary backup 5, then whoever your backup 4 is, you're going to want you're going to want that position flex. And like maybe it is Dean. I do think that it went wrong enough down the stretch that you can't just guarantee that. Like I think if you had asked me 2 months ago, I would have said Dean would just need to get healthy, and I have faith. But the jumper was bad enough, and you just realize I just left that going like we can't count on Dean that much. Like I think that Dean really has a great future with this team, but it kind of just felt like everyone was 1 or 2 spots too high in the "we need you to be great" power rankings, and Dean like needing Dean to be like the linchpin to the only thing stopping you from Jetty at the 4 just felt a little, it was just a little too much to ask of him. And and obviously you can look at how the shooting splits went after he hurt his collarbone, and that does matter. But even before that, like if you looked at his splits on open threes versus contested threes, not super great when he's closely guarded. So like there is something there where you have to say like, hey, like we need someone who we can trust to like hit a three with a closeout coming at him, playing those minutes.
That this team we don't have guys other than maybe Mitchell who shoot with a hand in their face at all. It's kind of jarring sometimes when you watch other NBA teams and how many threes they get off.
Story of the playoffs for me, Jeff, is like, oh my gosh, these guys are really firing them up.
Like we have to be wide open, and even then, pump fake and drive about 30% of the time. And a lot of these teams, I mean, they're shooting with no airspace whatsoever, and we need to find guys who do that. But I also think we need to find ways to challenge the guys we have, the Okoros, and like I said, the Garlands, and that Mobley's not going to be there for a while probably. But some of these guys, Dean, like need to be able to pull with less space and need to be doing it way more often. So there's like that internal growth could help there too. But yeah, we need to find guys that really do that.
The other thing that I think getting a big 3-4 to help with this roster, I think the other thing that it kind of does is it allows you to play more aggressive against point of attack players. Jackson Flickenshire posted this amazing stat in the from Warriors Kings, where when Steph was on the court, the Warriors' offensive rebound rate was 33.1%. When Steph was on the bench, it was 16.9%. And that very much mirrored the Knicks. When Brunson was on the court, the Knicks' offensive rebound rate was 42.1%, which is bananas, by the way. Just absolutely bananas. And that's in games 2 through 5. So that's when they started blitzing him. And then when Brunson was on the bench, it was down to 23.7, which is not great, but it's not going to lose you a series. Right. And I think the fact that if you are going to play a style where, okay, like, I get it, Okoro might not be perfect for every series, and even the biggest Okoro fan, I don't think you want to be like, we got to match his minutes to Brunson or any top point guard. He's got to play 42 for, like that feels like asking too much of Isaac. So if you are going to have to play this small backcourt, and you don't want to just say Jetty Osman, good luck, then you want to add more size to help protect yourself. Because if you're going to put two on the ball, like you look at a lot of Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein's offensive rebounds, a lot of them were not Robinson just manhandling from even footing, though he did have a couple of those. I don't want to let Jarrett off the hook. But a lot of them were Jarrett had to go shade strong side, or blow or help guard 4-on-3 because they blitzed Brunson, and then Mitchell is able to duck in and get great position, and if you're playing a little bigger at the 3 in some of those lineups with a little bit burlier of a person, a little bit of a stronger player, you can meet them. You can meet him there a little earlier. You can gang rebound. You can, I remember the Warriors in 2017 were throwing literally 2 bodies on Tristan Thompson to stop him from getting offensive rebounds. But we just didn't really have the size to do that, and we weren't really in the position to do that. So if you have that bigger lineup, I think that's one of the great things about the Lowry lineups last year, was that no matter who got switched out onto the perimeter, or whoever had to go guard in space, you still had 2 6'10" to 7-footers near the rim to go help, to go switch out, to go tag out, and then eventually you could stabilize and short circuit. So that I do think there is something there. How willing are you to chase a movement shooter to help resolve this, even if they aren't particularly big?
So I feel like this is like a dream thing that you and I have had for a long time. We always bring up like the Channing Frye or like the Kyle Korver that kind of unlocked the LeBron Cavs, right? That having that guy who is just moving around enough, wreaking a little bit of havoc on the defense and knocking down shots.
I'm
pretty willing to chase that. I just think with all the other offensive talent we have, it makes us scary on that end. And you're going to give up a lot on defense, but the offense could just be so good for stretches that it's absolutely worth it. Just throw it out, see how hot that lineup gets, see how many they're hitting, and it's a different look that might just run teams off the floor every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And after Game 4, I think I looked it up, and the Cavs had I think it was the 4th worst playoff offense in the last 4 years. Going up against the 17th best regular season defense. And I know some of those numbers are juiced because Robinson missed some time, and once he got back, and Hart got added, they took a leap. I get it. But there is a degree of like, if Josh Hart is the reason you lost a series in 5 games, you got bigger fish to fry. That can't be the reason.
It felt like I was taking crazy pills in some of the conversations because the offense was dead last in the playoffs. Awful. Like, we just couldn't score. And all anybody was talking about, and don't get me wrong, the rebounding was a big deal. It absolutely impacted the series. But like, if the offense was just mediocre, are we thinking about it? Does it matter? Are those games close?
No, in fact, after Game 1 of Knicks Heat, I've already started to see my prediction come true that if Jalen Brunson matched his numbers from Cavs Knicks, everyone would be like, oh man, I don't know if Brunson's got it. Right. Instead of him being like this absolute Cav killer offensive engine, can't believe we all underrated him so much, which I still feel that way. I still think he's a way better player than I ever thought he was. So like, I have to give him some credit, but like, if you're just scoring 108 points a game, you might sweep. Like, that's crazy. That was the bar.
He's hitting all these crazy contested shots that feel like backbreakers, but like, if we were scoring on the other end, him hitting a couple contested shots doesn't feel nearly as big of a deal because we'd be running him off the floor. So like, it's I don't know what lesson to learn from that other than just the shooting on the offensive side, though. And I know that's what we're going through. We're talking about how we add that, but it's interesting how far that went that fast. And I don't know if it was just sometimes just a bad shooting series, and sometimes Jared Allen's right and the lights are a little bright.
Here's the thing that I found concerning is, we spent a good portion of the season talking about shooting luck, much to the chagrin of our listener base, who wanted us to hold people accountable and grrr. And I get it. It's no fun to talk about luck. But after Game 4, I did not check after Game 5. But through 4 games, I went in and checked. The Caps were like 10th in the postseason in wide open 3-point percentage. They weren't. I opened it kind of desperately hoping to see them like 16th. They're just missing shots. But no, the offense was not good. This was a bad process series where they were not.
We didn't do it well at all. We were just missing shots. We were not getting good shots.
Yeah, they were not consistently able to pull Mitchell Robinson out of the paint. They were not consistently able to generate clean looks. Mobley struggled in the short roll, and none of their little pet actions worked. They just got beat up off ball for all their little split actions, and really a karmic way to go for the Cavs, given how we won our title, aka mugging the Warriors off ball. But that's what happened to us in this series, which again continues my comparisons with our offense and the Warriors' offense over the year. But it just feels like one of those kind of like the universe. Everything went wrong, especially on the offensive end of the ball. I think like we talk about everything going wrong. I actually think we probably should be crediting the defense. They played awesome. Played Julius Randle out of the series. Obviously the ankle was a factor, but really almost no one killed them. RJ had a couple great games, but really I think the defense was just fine. But the offense just wasn't dependable. But you know what is dependable, Nam? Our video conference software. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Jeff, I got to ask you. I think we both agree that Darius didn't have a good series. Donovan didn't have a good series. Evan had a good series on defense, but certainly not on offense. And Jarrett didn't have a good series. And yet, their lineup data with those 4 on the floor was pretty good. So what do you take away? What does that mean? Does it mean that does it mean that their fit and their talent level is so good that even when they all play poorly, they still can beat a team that is hitting on all cylinders? Or like what do you take away? I'm a little bit at a loss.
I think the defense is just a backbone. I think it's an absolute floor raiser for us. Like, no matter what, we can rely on that. And those 2 bigs do a lot there. It's why I bristle a lot at people who want to, look at different ways instead of having 2 bigs on the floor. I just think it's our identity. I think it gives you such a floor that it lets you be good. And if we had a little bit more variance, if we had a little bit more versatility in what we had around them to get the offense to make sure that was humming, that you're going to be okay. Like, I came away thinking, like, okay, if the offense is this bad, because a lot of times if you can't score, your defense starts to suffer, right? Like, how often do you see that? And it didn't. They were able to continue with that. And that to me is pretty encouraging in terms of that lineup.
Yeah. I think I'm at that point where I think you're right. I think the floor is just so high. And I think if you're looking at lessons to take away, it is we just need to find 4th and 5th guys to fill out lineups. Because once you look at that lineup data, once you go down to 3-man groups without the 4th on the floor, it just like it just wasn't there. And I think most of their quote unquote really bad minutes for all those stars did happen with 4th and 5th players on the floor that like they were just getting outscored. They were just not consistently creating good looks. And I think that to some extent, if there was a victim of some shooting luck, there were some stretches in this series where the starters were out there generating awesome looks and unable to make things. Like, if there was any stretches in the series where they were getting offense that I was like, okay, I see what they're trying to do. And Donnie missed a wide open 3 that Darius got for him, or Darius missed a mid-ranger, or Evan missed a short roll floater that he makes every other time. I do think it might have been there. But I guess what I would ask you is, has your belief in any of those 4 guys, do you feel like you have to adjust your expectations for them moving forward? Because clearly we were incredibly high on those 4 going into this series. And in a lot of ways, we're like, yeah, this is the playoffs. They have 4 of the best. In this, if we had known Randall was going to be in this kind of shape, we would have comfortably said we have 4 of the best 5 guys in the series. Comfortably. And that clearly did not play out that way in practice. I did, despite my bluster about Cavs in 5, I did warn that I thought there was a lot of variance on how that could play out. But with that said, Quickly also had a bad series. So, do you feel like you going into next season, going into next playoffs, you're going to kind of have a different perception around any of those 4, or is it just I want to see them with better spacing, with better versatility, with better 4th and 5th players?
I would say Garland is the one. And it's funny that his numbers ended up as good as they did because game 3 was so bad for him. And it felt like there was long stretches of other games where he struggled, but also had just some brilliant stretches where he was absolutely incredible. I want to see him continue to be aggressive. Like, even in game 4 or game 3 where they missed a million shots, he still kept taking shots, right? Do I have that right?
Yes.
Was it 4 for 20 or something? Yeah. And it was at least encouraging he was taking those, because I think sometimes he stops looking and he doesn't generate a ton of looks for himself, at least quality looks. Sometimes he'll be too easy to bait into running into traffic.
Well, I think
up a floater.
I think the best stat to say is Tony Pester for the Sword tweeted that midway through the 3rd quarter, Gabe Vincent had taken more threes so far in that game than Darius took in any game in the series.
And it's one of those things where I don't even necessarily know that he's playing poorly or doing something wrong. But if you're going to play with the lineups that we have, especially with the 2 bigs, he just has to create threes for himself more than he does. Like, for this to work, he has to do that. Even if his style makes sense now, and he can be efficient. Like for the whole team framework to work, especially in playoff setting, I just think he needs to create more looks for himself that aren't just running into traffic and throwing those up. So he's the guy where like I need to see that click for him. You know, he's far enough into his career where, all right, I need to see you kind of realize that you can take over in a different way. It's his main skill, right? Like his shot is so good. Like he should be leaning on that. Mobley is a guy that like I would hope he has better offensive performance next year, but it's the second year, and I'm not changing my long-term perspective on him at all. But Garland is the one where maybe just a little bit, I just want to see a little bit more next year, a little bit more selfishness or a little bit more hunting from him, because if you can't get that, I think it changes the ceiling for the team and how the roster can be constructed.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. And you kind of queued me up for Mobley, which is, again, I don't think I'm ready to change my opinion on the kind of player Evan is and is going to be. I still think the back half of the season, the decisiveness, the nastiness, the touch, the playmaking, that's all real to me. But I do think it's like, this is why the buzzkills among us that say, hey, can you cool it, are probably right. I mean, I think there's no better play to kind of cover his offensive performance in this series than when he caught the ball in the short roll, went to throw his patented lob to Jared Allen and threw it straight off the backboard, and it bounced so far that it almost went to the three-point line. Like, that is rushed, stressed offense in a way that I've never seen Evan play that stressed, that tight. It's Jarrett is going to get a lot of flack for his, lights were too bright comment, which I think is unfair, by the way. If I can soapbox for a second, I hate that we ask players to be honest. And then when they're honest, we go, ha, ha, ha. It's like, yeah, like we all watched that series. I think the lights were a little too bright for this team. I
love that he said that.
Yeah.
I was excited myself. Like there's nobody who watched that series does not believe that that's what happened.
Yeah.
So I want them to hear. I don't want to hear them just say, "Oh, well, we got outplayed." Blah 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 blah. Like I want them to say, like, "Oh man, I need to reevaluate this. I walked out there. That was too much. I'm now like I get it.
I know what it is now,
and
and I can be better."
Yeah.
But to that end, like Jarrett, I think Jarrett's struggles in that series kind of covered for Evan's offensive struggles in that series. I think people were so focused on Jarrett getting beaten up by Mitchell Robinson that they failed to see Evan short circuit on some of these floater attempts where it's like he's getting up there and he's like aiming it because he's so concerned about Mitchell Robinson. Obviously, Robinson had an awesome series, but like you're already seeing in this Miami series ways that they're attacking him. And I mean, this is one of the most foul-prone players in the league over the course of his career. Almost never got him unstable. And I think that's a byproduct of just being rushed. So I think Evan's growth, I think if I was hoping for that year 3 offensive mega leap, I think I'm giving it another year at least before I expect that. So like in that sense, I am adjusting my expectations for Evan, not in the long term, but in the short to midterm. I don't think it's fair to after that big of a exposure of his, of some of his limitations to be like, okay, he's ready to get 24 a game now. Like, I just don't think that's but maybe this is exactly what you need. Like, I've talked about it a lot. Like, I keep using like autopsy terms, but I think it's the best way to describe it. It's like, you have something to break down to see like, oh, this was taken away from me. Like, my limitations were laid bare and I have all summer to work on those things. So, like, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to, like, be a little patient. What about Jarrett? I feel like Jarrett is the one where you asked the most questions about coming out of that series. Just in the sense of I was always worried about him against, the Omega big men that were, hyper physical, but I meant like Joel Embiid. I didn't mean Mitchell Robinson. And the fact that he seemed tentative with his touch offensively, I think he had an okay defensive series. I think it was overshadowed by the fact that he got beat for so many boards, but I thought his help defense was pretty good. But it did feel harder to be like, this is a core 4 guy when you're getting run off the floor by Mitchell Robinson. Where do you feel about Jarrett coming out of that series? Like, do you just think it was like he was kind of a victim of scheme more than anything else? Or do you think it's like, hey, buddy, you got some limitations you got to work on too?
I think he absolutely needs to take some lessons from that. I mean, he just needs to get stronger. There's no question. And I don't want to absolve him because he clearly did not play well, but I do think he was set up to fail in a lot of ways. To your earlier point on the point of attack, we have two pretty small guards that are not keeping guys in front of them a whole lot, and he's asked to do so much. And I kind of wonder how much you can expect. We talk about the behemoths and stuff. Well, if you switch him out for somebody who's going to guard Joel Embiid, that's going to change the whole scheme, and that guy's going to get played off the floor by smaller teams that want to stretch you out. So it's kind of a hard one where he just sort of is what he is in that regard. That style works. It works with Evan and unlocks Evan in a way that is really important. So he needs to get stronger. But I think, to your earlier point, like, we need to surround them with players that don't put them in that position. I said it earlier, but like by game 5, if he's looking demoralized and getting beat on the boards every time, it's like we have to have another look. Like, we can't just keep going back to that. So he played poorly, but I feel like it's kind of exasperated by the fact that we couldn't really change what we were doing and give a different look. And he just had to kind of go out there and eat it the whole time.
Yeah, again, like, I think this is why you're going to hear me, you're going to hear probably Justin, you're going to hear Cavs Twitter talk about third bigs a lot of the summer. Like, this guy is not gettable at all for myriad reasons. And frankly, I'll lose my mind if we add another guy off an ACL. But like, someone in that Brandon Clark archetype who can be that 4-5, not just a 3-4, but if they can find someone who's a 4-5 who can help share the load, because I think against teams going small, Jarrett actually is great. I think it's actually against teams that go big that it's actually a little bit harder for him, because his greatest advantage, which is his vertical spacing and lob threat dominance, gets wiped out a little bit, and he has to finish with his touch over outstretched arms, and that's a lot harder. So like finding ways to like shift up in size as much as shift down in size matters a lot. Like, the Cavs played so small the back half of the season with Dean hurt and Kevin off the team. Like, it can't be the plan to put Danny Green or Jetty at the 4 next year. It just can't. And like, I know that they wanted it to be Dean. And hopefully this summer Dean can get healthy, bounce back. But again, I think I'm looking to invest in that 4-5 area, because like, the reality is, as much as I think I'll catch an L on thinking Robin Lopez would be a little bit more ready to help out. I think he's just on the wrong side of his age curve.
Yeah.
And like, I do wonder, because we've now seen it with Rolo. We saw it with Moses Brown last year. Did not expect a Moses Brown reference in this episode now, but I think I have settled with the idea that what they need is not a slow drop big, even if it's a really capable one, because I think it breaks what they do to the point their scheme is so not built around that it just doesn't, it's not compatible with the rest of the roster. Like, maybe I'd feel different if they really had a more spry big that was like an elite reader of the game. Like, if you have like Brook Lopez-esque guy, but you're not going to get that guy for like the minimum. So like, I think I'd rather take a risk at like, I know a lot of people loved Mamadi Diakite this year, and like, I don't think it's him as a a playoff rotation guy, but like someone that archetype, that 6'10", bouncy, high energy, high physicality. I do think that helps, because if you're not just going to be stronger and you're not just going to be bigger than Mitchell Robinson, because like they're not going to get stronger and bigger than Mitchell Robinson with the guys who are going to play heavy minutes. So you have to come at it with a different tack, and I think that winning the energy battle probably goes a long way. So trying to find someone who has a little bit more of that springy energy at the 4-5 seems meaningful. How much do you care about toughness right now with this team? Because I think the big narrative coming out of this was a bunch of nice young men that got beat up by a hyper physical team, and you need to be tougher if you're going to win. But then we just watched a hyper, quote unquote, tough Grizzlies team get run off the floor by the Lakers. And I've saw a lot of people saying, "Oh, that's toughness. That didn't help them so much." So, like, how much do you care about the word toughness right now, for this team, and like, how much do you think toughness should factor in to the types of players they look to, supplement the roster with?
I don't buy it nearly as much as like some of the more scheme stuff and roster, skill wise stuff that we've been talking about. It would be nice to have somebody maybe who provide a little bit of a wild card, but I'm not prioritizing it over fit of anything else or addition of any other skill. I think it's just a way to explain things away. Like, I don't know that Jared Allen got out toughed as much as he just was at a disadvantage. Like Mitchell Robinson, how much does he outweigh him by?
Yeah.
Right?
A lot.
A ton. Yeah. So, like, was he out toughed? I don't know. Or was he just smaller than him and not as strong as him? And
having to help on Jalen Brunson 4-on-3s.
Right. Like, he wasn't going to like help out on Brunson and come back and then dig Robinson out, Mitchell Robinson out of the lane. Like, it just wasn't going to happen. So I don't buy that it was just like a lack of toughness. It's hard because I do agree with like the lights too bright thing, but I don't think that's something you just add. It's not like you add some guy and now everybody's fine and the lights aren't too bright or whatever it is, right? Like, they just needed that experience. I think they'll come back next year having learned that and be tougher or whatever you want to call it. Like, they'll have that experience. They'll be more ready for it.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. This is a team that prided itself on its toughness all year. Like Junkyard Dog Chain, winning the scrap.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that does have to come from within, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to. But a lot of this just comes down to, you're gonna look less tough when your offense revolves on these off-ball actions that have 2 pin down screens, and you have a small guard that's trying to get loose. Like, whereas like New York gets to feel tough. They have a bunch of hyper physical offensive players that just burrow their way to baskets. So I don't know how much of that is playing the result. Again, you can't just not acknowledge the result because the Cavs did get beat up in that series. But I do think like maybe the Knicks wouldn't look so tough if they had to scramble out to Max Strus in the corner instead of Isaac Okoro.
Do you think we could be tough? Like, do you think tough is an attainable thing when you have Garland and Mobley and Allen? And I mean, Mitchell's like a big guy, but he's still kind of slight. Yeah, like at its base, the top end talent of this roster, is it suddenly going to be tough because we added a couple other guys, or is the identity of this team like not really trying to be tough?
I think it's an interesting question, but I do think it's still kind of chasing the wrong. I still think it's still chasing the result to me of kind of how this feels. I think that the number one factor that no one ever wants to acknowledge is the difference between grown man strength and young man strength. AD did not used to be strong. Like, he did not. He used to get pushed off his spots, and people called him soft. And you watch him in that Grizzlies series, like, compared to like Jaren Jackson Jr., who's also older than a guy like Evan Mobley, and it's like, oh, you're not like physically where he is. Like, he can beat you up, just on account of I'm older and bigger and stronger now. And like Jarrett just turned 25 10 days ago or whatever it was. Evan is 22. Is he still 21? I don't remember. It doesn't matter.
Still 21.
Either way, like, I think Evan has shown a predisposition to that kind of violent play that as he develops grown man strength, it'll start feeling a lot different. And then, I don't know. I think that the coaching staff prioritizes that contact. They like playing with it. So I think they can be, I guess is what I would say. They just can't get, they just can't be so behind the 8 ball. And again, are people not calling them tough if they score 109 points a game? Like, right. We might be annoyed, about offensive rebounds against the best offensive rebounding team in the league. But are we having an existential crisis as to how physical our team can be? I don't know about that. So like, I just think it was kind of a perfect storm, which again makes it really, really difficult to evaluate. And like, and I do think before we wrap, I do want to talk about Donovan Mitchell, because this was not. At the end of game one, I worried that this was going to be it's Donovan and everyone else type of series where he scores all the points because he knows what he's doing, and everyone else isn't ready, and now it's a whole narrative. But I thought, other than game one, and maybe parts of game two, where he was really mostly just giving the ball to Darius, that was bad in this series. And like, I do think that I talked a lot about how the top four have to be a certain level with the way the roster is constructed if you want to be a title contender. Like, that's just the way it is built. I also think Donovan has to be a certain level that's different.
His level is maybe a little bit higher than what the other guys.
Yes,
right?
It has
His
to
playoff
be.
level has to be.
Absolutely. And until Mobley's ready, and maybe that calculus changes a little bit. But like, here's the stark reality. I don't know him, because it's not like we hang out on weekends, but I think Donovan would tell you he did not play like a dude who had 3 firsts and 2 swaps and 3 rotation players traded for him. And as much as I want, and I think that's where I'm having a really hard time, because it's so easy to contextualize it away. The spacing was poor. The other guys were not ready. The depth was not showing up and consistently contributing. And yet I still look at that price tag. And maybe this is just straight up, we're spoiled because we had LeBron. Mm-hmm. But I am not used to the best player on my team not being able to solve the problem. And I think that, and maybe that's a coaching staff and a scheme thing. I think there's probably not enough being talked about the Cavs' offensive scheme in that series. The fact that they just didn't seem to try other stuff, as far as I could tell. Kind of felt like it was just banging your head against the wall offensively. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's the spacing. Maybe it's the depth. Maybe it's whatever it might be. But it did leave I didn't know that was a possible playoff outcome for Donovan Mitchell.
I did fear a little bit going to the series because everyone kept saying, well, Donovan Mitchell's a playoff player. Like, just wait till the playoffs. Like, this guy is a different animal in the playoffs. And when you count on that, things get really difficult, because if you don't get it, it can go south quick. And it did. So I want to start by saying, like, I'm not like blaming Donovan Mitchell. He's awesome. What was he, 6th in MVP? Like, that's very exciting that we had a guy 6th in MVP. And I have total faith he's going to be awesome going forward. But him being that bad offensively, I think you could argue is like the biggest difference in the series. Like, we were expecting him to be the steady hand, the guy who'd been
at least Brunson,
who'd been there.
Because Brunson was dealing with schemes built to mess with him, dealing with elite perimeter defenders guarding him, and Isaac Okoro, an elite help defense at the rim. And the fact that I didn't feel like he even matched Brunson's production, that definitely hurts. And I just think, like, ultimately, if we're talking about how we're kind of recalibrating our expectations for the 4 stars, and none of these, the core 4, none of these are like, I'm out on any of them. I still really believe in these 4. The fact that their lineup data is good, despite all of them having, disparately bad series, tells me that I feel comfortable that I'm right in that. But with that said, like, in terms of adjustments for Donnie, I no longer think he is scheme and matchup proof. Like, I think the Cavs are going to have to find ways to loosen him up in a way that you kind of didn't have to do that for LeBron. You know? Like, and I know it sounds so stupid to be like, he's not LeBron, but like, as diehard Cavs fans, we are so conditioned to watching like the best problem solver in NBA history solve problems. And this team's going to have to do more for Donovan Mitchell. So, like, in a way, yes, I'm throwing down the gauntlet at Donovan, but really, I'm throwing a gauntlet down at the rest of the team. That, like, and that's front office, that's coaching staff, that's his teammates. Like, you can't just, like, say, Donnie, go save us. Because I'm not saying it's going to be this bad against other series. Like, I do think there are a lot of specific things that made this matchup really, really hard. But, like, that cannot be your organizational philosophy. And I think that's a really important lesson to learn.
And looking back at the regular season, I think there was probably more times than maybe it felt in real time where the offense got completely lost, completely bogged down, and Donovan Mitchell just scraped together a performance that won us games.
Yep.
And dragged the offense through the mud and out and said, all right, we're gonna do this. And when he couldn't do that, it kind of felt like everyone was lost. And I almost wonder if that was part of it, where everybody was kind of like, wait, isn't this the time when Donnie comes and saves us? And like, he couldn't do it. And everybody was just like, oh, and it just went downhill fast because he couldn't do it. Like, there were so many stretches where it was like, oh man, we need a bucket. This is normally when Mitchell comes out and scores 8 quick ones. And it just was not happening. And it just felt like it spiraled from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was there. Everyone needs a release valve, but like, they might have to find a way to get a crowbar this summer, like to abuse that metaphor. So,
or just not rely on him so heavily. Like, give him, to your point, give him some help, give him the spacing, give him some scheme help. Like, let's not just say, all right, go save us. Like get him the help there to spring that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
or other guys that can do it.
Look at the environment in Utah that allowed him to be like the 5th leading playoff scorer, points per game of all time heading into that series. It was a ton of 4-out kind of offense with an elite screen and roll man that allowed him, easy reads. I mean, think about how many turnovers he had trying to pass through traffic. You're gonna have to try. You don't have to bend the spectrum all the way over that direction and say we're just making it easy for Donnie, because we saw that did not work in Utah. Eventually, they gave up too much on the defensive and rebounding side of things to make up for how electric that team's offense was. But you have to give him a little more to play with if you really want to see him maximize his potential. So, lot to learn. And again, like, thank goodness for this podcast, Nam, because it really does help me. I feel like I came into this podcast still kind of feeling adrift as to like what to take away. And I feel like as the Cavs front office and coaching staff evaluates, like, I think there are real takeaways to get to that are not quite as that are accounting for that this sucked to lose in 5 the way they lost in 5, but that don't have to be these broad stroke reactive things. That there are little, if you just tweak the knob, 5% one way, that everything gets a lot easier now. And this whole series might, turn on something that simple. So I do think they have some optionality, and they're not as trapped as you might think they are.
Yeah, I'm interested too, and it's less exciting because it's not transactions, it's not stuff you can see right away, and it's going to take a long time to bear out. But all right, they've tasted really bad defeat. How much better does the core 4 come back next year? How different are they when they come back? Do we see Darius take another leap? Does Mobley take a big leap? Do these guys just get in the lab all summer and work like crazy? Like, that to me might be as exciting as any real transactions we're going to do to replace the 6 through 10 guys or whatever. Like, I want to see what these guys come out like next year.
I've said this a lot, that I think that there was something really, really important in that, and I keep talking about LeBron, so I'm sorry if you're not a LeBron fan.
I mean, look at your wall. Like, there's a reason.
Yeah, of course. But I do think that the probably the most important year for LeBron's career was that summer after they lost to the Mavs, because it was the first time you could say there is no contextualizing this. There is no, there's no blaming my teammates. I just failed. I wasn't good enough to get things done the way I needed to, and I have to go nuts to improve at my shortcomings. I think last year, one of the biggest pain points of last year's injury collapse was that we got cheated of that moment. We that timeline almost pushed back a year of getting punched in the mouth and having to react to it, because even through the play-in, you could say, well, Karras played 6 minutes with the other starters, and Jarrett was playing with one hand in the second play-in and didn't play in the first one, and it was just so easy to say, once we're healthy, we'll get there and we'll be good. And then you trade for Donovan and you go, now we're really gonna be good. We have Donovan Mitchell and all these young guys. We're all nice. We all like hanging out together. We got good vibes. We got good talent. We're young. We're hungry. And boom, punched in the mouth. So, like, I really do think that everyone in the organization that is an opportunity to say, hey, we were the healthier team. We came in just as hot, if not hotter. And we still lost. And pretty convincingly we lost. So we're going to have to get better at every level or be doomed to face the same result. So I do believe in the integrity of this team. I do believe that this is a team of players who love basketball. And you cannot understate that. Like, these aren't a bunch of dudes who are just collecting a check and playing because they happen to be tall and athletic. I think that Kobe has really identified mostly like players who really freaking love the game and love being in the lab, love to grind. And like, if there was ever a group that I thought would bounce back, it would be this one.
I'm excited to watch it. I'm excited to see who comes back, what they've added, what they've done. And to your point, I hope everybody takes a look. So with some new players around and with some new schemes, like I'm excited to just see the lessons that everybody learned coming out of it.
Absolutely, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on. I think we ended in a good place. I'm getting myself ramped up. I'm playing around on Spot Track and free agency. I'm looking at ways to improve the roster in ways that will never ever matter and are a huge waste of time. Thank you so much for jumping on, Nam. You are truly the honorary third host of the Chase Down, and I always appreciate you coming on, buddy.
I always love the opportunity. Appreciate it. Good to talk with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Please go ahead and like that video and pump up that algorithm. If you are listening on audio, please subscribe, review the podcast, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, help cook those books, and help juice this wonderful Cavaliers podcast. We're going down to one a week for the postseason, so you'll see us mostly on Monday nights moving forward. Cannot wait to see what this postseason brings us. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And as always, go Cavs.